I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to play Discipline Priest in Cataclysm Classic for dungeons and raiding. That's going to include talent choices, glyph choices, how to actually play Disc Priest, of course, and even things like consumables, stat priorities, and everything else. Starting off with what race we are going to play. If you're going Alliance, I recommend Human for the human spirit, increasing your spirit by 3%. They do also have one for Diplomacy, reputation gains increased by 10%. Some of the Enchants that I'm actually going to show you are actually going to require that you get to a certain level of reputation with certain factions, meaning that especially now at the start of Cataclysm Classic, Diplomacy racial actually going to be really beneficial at getting those enchants that you need. If you are going Horde, however, I would recommend Troll for one reason and one reason only. And that is because of the berserking racial we have here. On a 3-minute cooldown, it is going to increase your casting speed for 20% for 10 seconds. This is almost like a mini bloodlust that we get to use and can be phenomenal when used correctly with other cooldowns and in times where you need to do a lot of healing. This here is going to be our stat priority as a Discipline Priest in Cataclysm Classic. Now, this can change a little bit. The first two, Intellect and Spirit, are always going to be your top two stats that you want on your gear, and they generally will come hand in hand on that gear anyway. This is actually going to increase both our mana and also our healing throughput. We are going to actually get some more intellect via some of our talents as well. Spirit has been changed in Cataclysm. If you are coming from Wattalk, it now does work properly in combat, and this is the main mana regen stat for healers now. If you do feel like you're not having any issues at all with mana regen, you can start looking to reforge out some of that spirit. But again, that really depends on how you feel when you're playing. Don't forget that reforging is a new thing coming in Cataclysm where we can actually change out some of our unwanted stats into more wanted stats. Mastery is a new stat we have, and this is a really interesting one for Disc Priests. We can see here that it's going to increase the potency of our absorption spells by 30%, each point of mastery increasing that by 2.5%. And we have a lot of absorption shields like Power Word Shield, etc, etc. This can be really useful, especially if we are healing one singular person, for instance, maybe a tank. Then we have haste, and I would actually say to do this over mastery if you are healing on a big raid AoE scale rather than more single target healing, and that is for a few reasons. One, it's going to reduce the cast time of all your spells. And we have spells that are AoE based, like Prayer of Healing, where we can spam these out over the entire raid. And getting these out quicker, of course, means a higher throughput of healing. Whereas single target healing, where we may be putting Power Word Shield, for example, like we've spoken about on the tank, we don't need as much haste, but more so we want to increase the absorption effects of those shields. And that's why I would say that you can swap these around depending on the situation at hand. So if you're doing more single target raid healing, I would go for more mastery, more AoE based, etc, or more throughput on healing over a larger group. It's going to be more haste you want. Lastly, critical strike, increasing the chance to get a crit on our heals. Now coming into game and actually looking at our talents we're taking, of course most of this is going into the discipline tree. Discipline Priests, I first want to preface this by saying that they're really versatile healers. Where some healers will just heal damage that has already come in, Disc Priests can actually do some damage. That damage turns into healing. They can put absorbs on the target, where it's actually going to basically absorb damage and prevent that damage from ever happening, and also smoothing out AoE healing across the raid, sometimes as well before it even hits. And that is through the use of things called Atonement and other abilities that we have. So the talents we are taking mainly is increasing the damage absorbed by our Power Word Shield by 20%. This is quite simply a shield spell we have, draws on the soul of the friendly target to shield them, absorbing damage and healing for 20% of the absorption amount, lasts 15 seconds. While the shield holds, spellcasting will not be interrupted. Once shielded, they cannot be shielded again for 15 seconds. And if I shield myself, that debuff that we get where we can't be shielded again is this one here, Weakened Soul. Twin Disciplines increases your holy spell healing, and Mental Agility reduces the mana cost of your instant spells. Soul Warding reduces the cooldown on your Power Word Shield by a few seconds. And then we have the really interesting one, Evangelism. When you cast Smite, Holy Fire, or Mind Flay, TLDR, we're only going to be using Holy Fire and Smite. These are actually 2 DPS spells. We're going to gain Evangelism, and it can stack up to 5 times for 20 seconds. What does Evangelism actually do then? Well, it's going to increase the damage done by our Smite, Holy Fire, and Penance spells by 4% and reduce the mana cost of those spells by 6%. Then we have the talent Archangel, consuming those Evangelism effects that I've just spoken about, causing an effect depending on what is consumed. So we're only going to be using the light one, Evangelism, because we're not using the dark one. Instantly restores 1% of your total mana and increases your healing done by 3% for each stack. So basically then we can cast Smite and Holy Fire, ramping up those stacks of Evangelism, and then consuming them to restore mana and increase healing done. We then have Renewed Hope, increasing the critical strike of a lot of our spells on targets afflicted by our weakened soul. And remember, that is people that have been recently had our powered shield on them. Then we have Power Infusion, infuses the target with power, increasing spellcasting speed by 20% and reducing mana cost. You can use this on yourself for a big, juicy buff. And we've got Inner Focus on a 45-second cooldown, reducing the mana cost of your next heal basically by 100% and increasing its crit chance. And if it's starting to sound confusing, don't worry, I'm going to go through all of the spells, showing you how it comes together as a rotation shortly, where we're going to digest it in a beginner-friendly format if you don't know how Discipline Priest works. We then have another really interesting one that pairs up with our with our Evangelism. When you deal damage with Smite or Holy Fire, that's the 2 we're using for our Evangelism, you instantly heal a nearby low health friendly target within 15 yards from the enemy target, equal to 100% of the damage dealt. So basically, when we're dealing damage with our Smite and Holy Fire, we're also going to be doing healing, as well as getting those Evangelism stacks. If the priest is healed for Atonement, the effect is reduced in half. Borrowed Time, gaining spell haste for your next spell after casting Powered Shield. We're going to be using that a lot, so that's passive. Powered Pain Suppression, it's a defensive. We're going to go through that shortly. Divine Aegis, critical heals, and all heals from Prayer of Healing create a protective shield on the target, absorbing 30% of the amount healed. So we have this spell here, Prayer of Healing. It's basically an AoE heal, a powerful prayer, heals the friendly target's party members within 30 yards and an additional 20% over 6 seconds. When I cast this, because of that talent Divine Aegis, you can see here we've now got this beautiful shield bubble on us, which is separate to Powered Shield. You can see I've got 2 bubbles on me. One is from the Divine Aegis on Prayer of Healing, and one, of course, is actually from Powered Shield itself. Speaking of shields, we also have Powered Barrier, another big cooldown, summoning a big barrier that we can put wherever we want. So if we know that there's a big AoE amount of damage coming in, everyone can get under the barrier, and it's going to reduce damage taken by 25%. When they are in the barrier, of course, not when they're outside it. Lastly, a few other interesting talents in Holy and Shadow. Free in Shadow for Darkness, increasing our haste by 3%. Divine Fury, reducing the casting time of some of our spells. Empowered Healing, increasing the healing done by some of our spells. And Desperate Prayer. Basically, it's a self-heal for 30% of your health on a cooldown. So how... Oh, no, not how we're going to put it together. We've got to go through glyphs. Silly me. We've got, for the prime glyphs, Glyph of Powered Shield, increasing the absorption amount by 20%. That's actually how much, it heals them for 20% of the absorption amount. Penance, reducing the cooldown of Penance, another one of our spells. Prayer of Healing, the one we just spoke about regards to Divine Aegis. Your Prayer of Healing spell also heals an additional 20% of its initial heal over 6 seconds. And that you can see has actually updated on the tooltip there. So you don't need to worry about remembering some of these things. They're just going to be happening anyway. For our major glyphs, we have Smite. This is only going to work for our Atonement, where our damage is therefore doing healing. Your Smite inflicts an additional 20% damage against targets afflicted by Holy Fire. So, let's recap on our Atonement. When you deal damage with Smite and Holy Fire, you're instantly going to heal somebody for 100% of the damage dealt. We then have Holy Fire. Consumes the enemy in Holy Flames that causes holy damage, an extra amount of holy damage over 7.41 seconds. And then we have Smite. Basically, it's just going to do holy damage. And remember, the damage is going to be increased if they have Holy Fire on them. So I should actually put these the other way around, technically, if I'm trying to show you it, by doing Holy Fire first, on cooldown, and then using Smite on the target. The other 2 we have is Divine Accuracy, increasing the chance to hit with your Smite and Holy Fire by 18%. This is basically hit capping you for those DPS spells. As a healer, we usually don't need to worry about hitting the hit cap because we're not doing DPS. However, as a Discipline Priest, we are. But we don't really want to get hit on our gear. That would be a waste. Hence, this glyph fixes that problem. Glyph of Prayer of Mending, the first charge of it heals additional amounts. More on that shortly. Glyph of Fortitude reduces the mana cost of it. Fade reduces the mana cost. And Shadow Mend, Shadow Fiend, receive 5% of your maximum mana if Shadow Fiend dies from damage. More on that shortly as well. So how is this all going to come together into the rotation? First things first, let's look at what we're going to do for if we're doing big healing on a single target like a tank. Well, first things first, we have Penance here. A volley of healing or damage, generally we're going to be doing healing with it. Launching a volley of Holy Light at the target, causing holy damage to an enemy or healing an ally. Every time basically it fires a bolt. You can see here we're channeling it, and that's going to be doing healing, 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 healing. And that is on a 10-second cooldown. We should be using it on cooldown on a single target that's taking a large amount of damage, for instance the tank. And the same with Powered Shield. We can use this if the tank or somebody else is taking heavy damage, for instance in dungeons, draws on the soul of the friendly target, shielding them, and also healing them, remember, for 20% of the amount absorbed. And if we need to get a huge heal on them, they've already taken that damage, and Penance, for example, is on cooldown, we can use Greater Heal. It's quite a slow heal, as you can see, but it is going to heal them for a large amount of health. If we don't have time to get Greater Heal out, we can use Flash Heal. And you can see here that Greater Heal and Flash Heal basically have the same mana cost, whereas Greater Heal has a much slower cast time. Flash Heal is an emergency, quick, hasty heal. We've also got Binding Heal, heals a friendly target and the caster. So you're going to use this one if you're healing somebody else and yourself. And that's all of your main single target healing. There is one other actually, Heal. Basically, if it's not a huge amount of healing, Heal is your medium length in cast time basic filler heal. We can use this just to heal a bit here, heal a bit there, heal a bit everywhere. Okay, we're just using that as a kind of filler. One that you want to use on cooldown is also Prayer of Mending. This is basically going to place it on somebody who you choose. You can see here there's 5 stacks on me. When I take damage, that's going to bounce to another person. And then when they take damage, it'll bounce to somebody else. And it'll keep bouncing until all charges have gone. So there's 5 stacks on me, it'll bounce to the next person, and they'll have 4 stacks, and it'll bounce, and it'll be 3 stacks, etc. We can use this on cooldown. It is only going to stack to 5, meaning if somebody already has it on them, use it on somebody else so it can bounce around, especially in a raid, healing many people when they take damage. Reading the tooltip then, places a spell on the target that heals them when they next take damage. When that occurs, it's going to jump to a party or raid member within 20 yards, jumps up to 5 times. But you can only have it on one target at a time. If you're on the move, we can use Renew. It's not the most efficient spell regarding mana, etc., and how much it really heals. Heals a target for 2,000 every 2.8 seconds for 11 seconds. Use this, like I said, if you're on the move, because it's instant, it's a heal over time, but just try not to spam it too much because you can easily run out of mana when doing that. Lastly, we have our Prayer of Mending. That's just an AoE heal. That again, you can see it takes a bit of a cast time, and that's why in raids we want to get a fair amount of haste to get our Prayer of Healing out quite quickly and rapidly, healing any AoE damage on the raid. So these are our main heals, etc. In a raid setting, what you can do is spam out some powered shields if you know a certain group of people, etc., are going to take damage. Put that on before it comes in. For single target healing in dungeons and raids, we can use Penance, Greater Heal, Flash Heal, and Binding Heal, like I explained. Heal as a filler. Keep Prayer of Mending on cooldown. Use Renew sparingly on the move. And in more AoE situations or in the raid, we can spam out Prayer of Healing. Don't forget, you can also, of course, use your Holy Fire and your Smite for your Evangelism and your Atonement healing. You can see here, I'm getting up my Evangelism stacks. So at 5 stacks then, increases the damage done by your Smite, Holy Fire, and Penance by 20% and reducing the mana cost of them. We can then use our Archangel, remember, to absorb those effects. You can see here, healing increased by 15%. And Atonement healing is really, really powerful as a Discipline Priest. It's definitely the most interesting healer there is, especially because of this. We've then got an insane amount of cooldowns here I want to talk. Don't forget Inner Focus reduces the mana cost and increases the crit chance of your next spell. When you do use Inner Focus, you can see which spells are going to be affected. It's only on a 45-second cooldown. Use it on cooldown, otherwise you're wasting the use. Pain Suppression is a defensive you can use on one person, ideally the tank maybe, if they're about to take huge damage. Instantly reduces a friendly target's fret by 5% and reduces all damage they take by 40%. Do be careful on the fret. However, still fine to use on tanks, etc. They may call out for it, or you may tell them when you're about to use it. It really depends on the use case for this. Powered Barrier, a placeable barrier. Remember, of course, reducing damage everyone takes when they're in the barrier. Really good for AoE. You can use your power infusion on cooldown, increasing your casting speed and mana cost by 20%. Really good if you're spamming out AoE heals, for instance, on Prayer of Healing, with that extra casting speed and mana reduction. Speaking of mana, we've got Hymn of Hope on a 6-minute cooldown, restores 2% mana to 3 nearby low mana party or raid members, increasing their maximum mana as well, and you must channel it. We've gone through Archangel. Desperate Prayer is going to heal 30% of your health, only yours. That's a desperate heal for yourself. Divine Hymn is on an 8-minute cooldown. Imagine it as a super duper Prayer of Healing. Heals 5 nearby lowest friendly party or raid members and increases healing done to them by 10% for 8 seconds. Maximum 20 heals, and again, you must channel that spell. So we've got a wide array of cooldowns here. Lastly, Shadow Fiend creates a Shadowy Fiend to attack the target. The caster is going to receive 3% mana when the Shadow Fiend attacks. Don't forget, you receive 5% of your mana if the Shadow Fiend also dies from damage as well. That's one of the minor glyphs we've got. And lastly, we've got a few utility spells. Cure Disease, removing a disease effect from your friendly target. Dispel Magic, dispelling magic, removing 2 harmful spells from a friend or 1 beneficial from an enemy. And Masty Spell. It's a huge area of effect version, dispelling magic in that area. And priests are very unique in having this ability. It is tremendously amazing. Don't forget your power word Fortitude, of course, increasing the stamina of all your party and raid members. And then we have 2 inner spells. You can choose between Inner Fire or Inner Will. You can only have one of them up on yourself at a time. Inner Fire increases the armor value from items and spell power. And Inner Will reduces the mana cost of your instant spells and increases your movement speed. It's up to you which one you have. Inner Fire is generally better, but if it's a fight where you need a lot of mobility, Inner Will could be better. Lastly, we've got our 2 damage spells, which we've spoken about regarding Atonement and Evangelism. And that is it regarding the main rotation. If you have any questions at all, or you find it confusing, do join my Discord and I can help you out some more. Disc Priest is the most, in my opinion, complex healer that there is in Cataclysm Classic. Regarding the consumables and enchants and professions we're going to take, I've got this handy spreadsheet. No, it's not a spreadsheet, it's PowerPoint. I've put this together for you. First things first, the 2 main enchants on the left. One is going to be Power Torrent. This is on your weapon. This is going to enchant a weapon to sometimes increase your intellect by 500 for 12 seconds. The other one you can use is Heart Song. It's up to you which one you use. I personally prefer Power Torrent. And then there's the Arcanum of Hyjal. This is a head slot item adding 60 intellect and 35 crit. You do need to be revered with the Guardians of Hyjal to get this. It is a leveling zone from 80 to 85, and I've done a rep guide that you can see on my channel for this. I would advise that you level here. Doing most of the quests, I think I filmed my guide the other day, but I can't remember. I'm pretty sure doing all of the quests there gets you into Revered, or is it Honoured? Watch my reputation guide and it'll tell you, because I've forgotten. But anyway, that's what you need from them to get that. And Pharazane, which is in Deepholm, the reputation there also gets you the shoulder enchant. Regarding gems, I recommend these 3. The Brilliant Inferno Ruby, adding 40 intellect. For yellow ones, Reckless Ember Topaz with intellect and haste, and the Purified Demon's Eye for intellect and spirit on blue sockets. Regarding what professions you take, every profession gives you something, a bit of an edge, right, in combat. The 2 I mainly recommend would be tailoring and enchanting for the reasons on my right. For tailoring, we can actually get Lightweave Embroidery, having a chance to increase our spell power by 295 for 15 seconds, and one of my favourites on all classes is enchanting. Why? Because we get to enchant our rings, meaning we can put 23 spell power on each ring. You can use it on both rings, meaning we're going to get 46 extra spell power. You could also go for jewel crafting. They get better gems, but considering that it's just better gems when everyone can have gems, I like the fact that enchanting gives you something that nobody can have, which is an actual enchant on your rings. Don't think you're outsmarting the system by taking enchanting and then putting them on there and swapping it. You will lose the effect of the enchant if you drop enchanting. Regarding other consumables, we're going to be using the Flask of Draconic Mind, increasing intellect by 300%, 300%? By 300, sorry, for an hour. If you need mana, mythical mana potion here, or the Potion of Concentration, puts the embody in an elevated state of concentration where you can restore up to 22,000 mana, but you're defenseless until your concentration is broken. TLDR then, it's better than the mythical mana potion by over double, but you do have to stand still and meditate while it's channeling. So It depends. I used to love the Potion of Concentration, but again, you do need to be careful when you use this, especially if it's in a raid. Generally thinking that you're going to be running out of mana near the end of the raid as well, rather than the start. Normally the end of the raid boss is when things are most chaotic. So things to think about. That food for thought on that one. Speaking of food, severed sagefish heads. How delicious. I love a severed head for breakfast in the morning. Adds 90 intellect and 90 stamina. And if you do need a healing potion, it's your mythical healing potion. And that is pretty much it for how to heal as a Discipline Priest in Cataclysm Classic. If you're wondering about the other enchants, by the way, I haven't gone through them in here. It's pretty straightforward on just like getting intellect and the basic stats, etc. Just the main obvious enchants that everyone is getting. The two I mentioned specifically is because they're a bit more nuanced in what you're choosing. So hopefully this was helpful. If you would like to see more videos like this and you want to support the channel, you can join my Patreon. There's a link in the description for that. I only do this in my spare time and I do love doing it, but of course it does take a lot of time and effort putting these videos out for you guys. And I really do appreciate the support, especially where most people are using ad block these days. And it's very difficult to make actually any ad revenue on YouTube anyway. And if you have any other questions, etc., do join the Discord. I'm there to help. My other members are there to help, especially if you're new to Kata or returning, etc. And if you are looking for other class guides, check out this playlist here. I've done all of them for Cataclysm Classic because yes, I am a crazy alt-aholic.